Hello everybody, welcome back to JBS. We're going to be continuing our own little trance through the genres in the Bible, and we spent quite a lot of time in the Old Testament already with the genres of law and history, but now we're going to do the Gospel of Letters, or as they're otherwise kind of called, the epistles, which are primarily in the New Testament. And so to start off, perhaps it's worth mentioning why letters were actually written, and it kind of starts with the ascension of Christ. So after Jesus kind of appears to a bunch of people and teaches them for a time, he commands them to go out and spread the gospel to the ends of the earth. And then he ascends into heaven and leaves them with this charge. And so these people go out, they evangelize, they build up churches, but the goal is to spread it throughout the ends of the earth. And so they're constantly traveling, they're constantly trying to reach further and further out to spread the word as much as possible. And what that means is that as they're going out, they're making disciples, and then they're having to move on. And so letters is a way for them to stay in contact with those who have become Christians and continue teaching them in the faith that they've just become a part of. And so Paul is very much known for this. He wrote a bunch of letters. Most of the letters in the New Testament are Paul's, because he was the apostle to the Gentiles, meaning that he was his explicit job was to go out and evangelize to those who didn't know God at all. So they weren't Jews, they were Gentiles. So they had no idea who God was. And so he went out, taught them, and they had to move on to evangelize to others, and kept sending letters back in order to inform them more and more about the God that they now worshipped. It was quite common for the time, and they do make up most of the New Testament. So we have the four Gospels, Acts, and then the rest is letters, I believe. Except for maybe Hebrews. Hebrews is weird. But yeah, most of the New Testament is letters. And so letters are interesting because they teach things quite propositionally. That is, it's quite obvious and direct with what it's saying most of the time. With Ephesians 2:8 and 9, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and it is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not through works, so that no one can boast. And then 10, for we are God's workmanship, created in him to do good works. It's quite obvious. We are saved. We are saved by our faith, but both salvation and faith is only available through the grace of God and his love for us. And then what do we do when we are saved and when we have faith? Well, we do good works. That's quite propositional, quite obvious. And so in many ways, it's the easiest of the genres to really pick up and just go through. So I just want to give you a few tips to try and get the most out of the reading experience. And so tip number one is that we should not read the letters as though they were written for you. It might sound weird saying that because the Bible is, of course, for Christians, and we are Christians, so therefore the Bible has to have been written for us. And in a way it was, because God has made all of Scripture relevant for all generations of Christians, not just the immediate ones. However, the books were written for the original ones. So, for example, when Paul is writing to the Philippians, he is writing to the Philippians, right? He's not writing to you, he's writing to them with specifically their context in mind. He knows the Philippians, he knows what they need, he knows what they want. Perhaps he might have even gotten letters from them that have said, this is what's going on, we need your guidance. And he said, cool, here's my response to that. Here's the dot points to all the questions that you've asked. Here are the answers. The reason why it's helpful is because even though they aren't written to us, they contain knowledge and information that we are interested in, namely about who God is and how we should live as Christians. And this kind of leads me into number 2, which is looking at these documents as historical, right? We need to make sure that we know the context of the day. The Corinthian church is a fantastic example of this. The Corinthian church, Corinth, was a hub for many, many different religions. And so when Paul evangelizes and set up this church in Corinth, they had to figure out what it meant to live exclusively to God, because they probably, most of them lived lives in worship to many gods. And so they would go to church on a Sunday, and then like the next day they'd go up to the temple of Athena or Aphrodite and worship there instead. And that led them into idolatry, that led them into adultery. They didn't do the Lord's Supper correctly. There are all kinds of divisions and problems going on in the Corinthian church. And so Paul is writing to address those specific issues. And we can understand how, in their context, they can be kind of drawn away so quickly from the gospel of Jesus. And then from that, we can kind of think, well, are we much better? You know, how many things are there in this world that require our attention, that demand that we pay attention to them instead of God? And then we can kind of go to the Corinthians and we can think, well, we're a lot like them. You know, we're in this world, we need to be devoted to God, but there are all these other things that want us to worship them instead. And how do we deal with that? Well, Paul's word works great there because we have similar circumstances to the Corinthians. But this, by and large, is a word to the Corinthian church because of the issues they are facing in their own context. Point number 3. We should read them as theological, not personal. And by that I mean that we should read them first and foremost as revealing things about God. And then that theology applies directly to us personally. So for example, in Philippians, it says, cast your anxieties on God, for he cares for you. Now, once again, this is historical and not for us, right? So this is a letter that Paul has written to the Philippians. They should be the ones who cast their anxieties on God because he cares for them. Now, why is this important to us? Well, because the theology is that God is a loving God, that he wants his followers to cast their anxieties and their worries on him, and he wants to be there to comfort and care for his people. And those 3 things are insights into God's character that still apply today, because it's all about how he relates to Christians, to his people. And so we have theology, and then we apply it to us personally. But we shouldn't skip the theology, because primarily the Bible is about knowing more about God and loving him, not just knowing what he can do for us, like take away our anxieties. We need to actually know him as a person. Tip number 4, when you're reading through a letter, try to pick up on repeated themes or repeated words. So in the Corinthian idea, there's a big theme about idolatry, about being drawn away from God and towards other things. Do not go to other temples, do not do sexual adultery, which is a practice of the other pagans that they're trying to tempt you into doing. Don't eat food eating food sacrificed to idols is an issue. All of this kind of stuff is about idolatry. And as you're reading through, as you pick up on each of these little points, it points to the larger picture of idolatry. And we can look at these little different points, pick up on the repeated words, the other gods, the pagans, all the things that they do would be one of the big kind of words and themes that would be present there, and that would all point you to idolatry. And that informs you, once again, what the Corinthian church was dealing with, and then how they're being guided against it by Paul. And the rule number 5, lucky last, is to read it all. Like all in just like, not like all the letters, but if you want to read a letter, sit down, read through it all, get the vibe of it, get the gist, and then come back and just go through it chapter by chapter in more manageable chunks, so you can sit down and really spend time in it. But you want to get that vibe quickly so that you can understand kind of the context of what's going on, what are the big points, what are the big themes that are going on, and then as you sit down and look at it chapter by chapter, you can really delve into the meat of what's being said there and why it's been chosen. Oh, well, we've got more homework for you, fun, as always. This week, I want you guys to read through the letter of 1 John. It's not really long, it's 1, 2, 3 pages actually, so it's quite manageable. Only 6 chapters, I believe. 5, how good is that? So a chapter a day would easily get you there. I don't know if you want to try tip 5 and just read through it all in one go and then read it kind of a chapter a day and see if that helps you. But I want you guys to read through 1 John, and I want you guys to be thinking, what does it say? What is the purpose for it being written? And let's keep with those 2 for now. Those 2 should be good enough. If you have any other questions that pop up while you're reading it, let me know on Friday. So youth group, I'm going to find you guys and I'm going to say, how did you do about the homework? And I hope you guys have an answer for me. But for now, we'll leave it there. Have a good week and I'll see you on Friday.